Hello everybody! It is time for my final video of 2021, which is of course my last book haul of this year. I've been doing quarterly book hauls and they've been very big. I think I have 29 things to show you today, and let's say that I kind of slowed down on reading things as I acquired them, so I haven't read as many of these as I would have liked, but that's just how the last 3 months of this year has gone. I'm not gonna beat myself up too much about it. So without further ado, let's get into this whirlwind tour of the books that I acquired over October, November, and December. Alright, let's start with the 4 SF Masterworks that I've acquired, and I have read 3 of the 4 of these. So first up is the Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. This is the 3rd book by him that I read, and I think I talked about this in a wrap-up. The first 2 that I read by him, I did a whole video on. I enjoyed the Midwich Cuckoos. I think this is one of his most famous novels. There was a movie kind of based on it. I enjoyed it, and I was a bit surprised by the ending because I expected it to just continue being this sort of sleepy English village alien invasion thing, and then it was like, oh, you went there. But yeah, very glad that I have finally been reading John Wyndham, and I kind of wish that there were more of his books in the SF Masterworks line. There are only 3 of them, and they are the hardcover versions only. I think they are out of print now, and getting hold of at least this one is a little bit difficult, but worth it because I did enjoy it. Then I got copies of 2 titles that I already read some time ago, and I wanted to add them to my SF Masterworks collection. The first one is The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. This is one of my, I guess, favorite Wells stories. I don't love all of his things, which is why I haven't bought SF Masterworks copies of all of them, like The Island of Dr. Moreau. I hated that book. But War of the Worlds was surprisingly good, and I thought it might be one that I would actually revisit sometime in the future. And then I was so happy I finally stumbled across the SF Masterworks title of Earth Abides by George R. Stewart. And this one I also read some years ago, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago now, I feel like. This was published in 1949, and it is a post-apocalyptic story when most of humanity has been wiped out by a pandemic, I believe. And it follows one man, one of the survivors, as he lives and kind of explores the sort of post-human environment, and then encounters other survivors. And what I remember most about this book is frankly that it still felt like a good story and it was relevant. It's an interesting story to discuss with other people about like how realistic some of the things in it are. I've talked about this multiple times with my dad, who really enjoys this book. He's the reason why I actually read it. And yeah, it's just still a good story. And then the other SF Masterworks title that I haven't read yet, this is one on my reading list. It is Karel Capek's R.U.R. and War with the Newts. I have read R.U.R. It's a relatively short play, and I read it in university 10 or more years ago. And I have not read War with the Newts, which I think is the bulk of this book. So hopefully I'll get to this one in the near future. It has been on my like SF Masterworks challenge reading list for a couple of years now. Now moving on to other things, I have The Fox's Tower and Other Tales by Yoon. This is a collection of flash fiction, and it is full of just little gems. I am not actually a fan of flash fiction, but this was a wonderful collection. I highly recommend it for people who love Yoon fiction just in general. If you like his work, I think you will enjoy this one too. And yeah, just really lovely read. I think I talked about this a little bit more in like a batch wrap-up of other anthologies. Then some surprising finds at a used bookstore. I stumbled across a copy of The Spirit Ring by Lois McMaster Bujold. It may surprise you to know that despite my incredible love of Bujold's work, I haven't actually read everything by her. What I have left to read from her body of work are fantasy. And The Spirit Ring was her first ever fantasy novel. I think it was published in 1992-ish. Yes. And I wasn't sure if it would be something I'd like to track down or not, and then a copy of it almost literally fell into my hands, so I got it. I do know a little bit about this because I've like read some summaries and analyses of this book from like the Modern Masters of Science Fiction title on Bujold, and I remember thinking that it sounded actually like something I'd be interested in, so I will give this one a shot. And of course it's Bujold, so there's a very high likelihood I will enjoy it. Then I have this collection by Elizabeth Moon called Phases. I grabbed this because I thought it was a science fiction novel by her that I'd never heard about. And then it turned out when I got it home that it's actually a short story collection. I think it's a mix of fantasy and science fiction, but the title and the cover of this paperback make it look like a sci-fi novel. Okay, I've only read one story from this. I just read the first one, which is called Bargains, and I liked it. I think it's set in one of her fantasy worlds, and yeah, at some point I will go through this collection. It's been a while since I've read something by Elizabeth Moon, and I'm always here for anything that might have more for science fiction in it. Then we have two of my most anticipated books of 2021, which I have not even cracked open yet. The first is Darcie Little Badger's A Snake Falls to Earth. This is her second novel. I read Elatsue by her last year, loved it, and of course immediately pre-ordered her second novel. I'm not entirely sure if this is middle grade or YA. I think it's probably YA. And it is about a Lipan Apache girl and a Cottonmouth boy from the Land of Spirits who are kind of thrown together unexpectedly because of a catastrophic event. And I don't know much more about it than that, but I think that if it's anything like Elatsue, I will enjoy it very, very much. This is one that I will probably try to buddy read with some of my friends who also read Elatsue, because we'll probably have some really interesting discussions. The other highly anticipated book is, of course, Perhaps the Stars by Ada Palmer, the fourth and final book in the Terra Ignota series that started with To Like the Lightning. I have done standalone reviews for the first 3 books in this series if you want to know more of my thoughts on them, but I have loved this series, and my goodness, this final book is a chonker. I think it's almost 600 pages long. I'm going to have to reread the first 3 books before I get to the final one. I don't usually reread books before getting to their sequels. I don't find I usually need to, but with such a big gap between the first 3 books and the conclusion and how complicated this series is, I think I would be doing this last book a disservice if I didn't refresh my memory. So rereading the first 3 books is probably a challenge I will set for myself in 2022, but I have this, it is here, it exists. I've been waiting so long for it, and yeah, can't wait. Next are a couple of books that I read a while ago and I got copies for my collection. The first one is No Time to Spare by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is one of her final essay collections. It came out in 2017, and I believe that this won the 2018 Hugo Award for Best Related Work. I did like this. I think most of the pieces in this are from her blog. A lot of them are about her cat, I think, about Pard. So I like this, but it's not one of my favorite collections by her, but it was good. I think I read the NetGalley arc of this, which is why I never had a physical copy before, but finding this in a used bookstore, I was like, yes, I need it, and it's in great condition. It's basically like new. Next is The Golden Tresses of the Dead by Allan Bradley. This is the 10th and potentially final Flavia de Luce mystery novel. I don't have book 9. For a long time I was collecting these trade paperbacks as soon as they came out, and I got a little bit behind, so I never got 9, but then I found 10 in a bookstore. So this mystery series is set in the 1950s in England. It follows a 12-year-old girl who is into chemistry and poisons and investigating dead bodies, basically. The first half of this series is fantastic. It's one of my favorite mystery series. I will admit that the second half isn't as strong, but for people who stick with the series and really love Dogger, he becomes a main character in the last couple of books, and that has made everything worth it for me. He is my second favorite character, just behind Flavia in the series. So someday when I have all 10 books, I will probably do a big reread. The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nghi. I loved this novella. I also liked the sequel, and I believe there's going to be a third one out next year. But I just got a copy of the first one because it's particularly like my favorite, and it was there, so I grabbed it. I also really enjoy the covers of these. What was the artwork by? Oh, the cover art is by Alyssa Winans. No wonder I like it. I really enjoy her art style, so I have this. If you don't know what this is, I think it just won the Hugo Award for Best novella a couple of weeks ago, in fact, and it is about a cleric from, I think it's from the Singing Hills Monastery, who goes around collecting stories basically, and in this one they meet the like former handmaiden of the past Empress and are hearing stories of that woman's life, and it is wonderful. It's one of those stories that has a more complex framing device for it, like stories within stories, and I think it was done beautifully, wonderfully, just fantastic. And of course, more Bujold, because I got my Subterranean Press hardcover edition of Masquerade in Lodi. This is one of the Penric and Desdemona novellas, and it's one of like the flashback ones, which is in publication order out of sequence chronologically. So this is a flashback to a bit earlier in Penric's life, and is another encounter with a saint. I enjoyed it, but it's not one of my absolute favorites. Like, whenever I have to say something like, what is my favorite like Penric novella, even if I say it's not one of my favorites, I still probably rate it at 5 stars, because when are these not fantastic, you know? Anyway, I have it. I think another reread of this series is going to be in order at some point, because it's just like the perfect comfort read for me. Then I have 2 books that my friend Andrea sent to me. Her channel is Infinite Text, and a little while ago she did an artist spotlight on Jessica Roux, and I was like, oh my gosh, I like Jessica Roux's artwork so much, and she has a book called Floriography. It is about the Victorian language of flowers, and when I mentioned to Andrea that I really wanted to read that, she's like, I gotcha. She sent me a copy of it. So I have, of course, already read this and admired the artwork. It is so pretty and such an interesting topic. I really, really enjoyed this, so really worth picking up. If you've ever been interested in this whole idea of like the language of flowers and stuff like that, this is a perfect little book to pick up, and it's beautiful. And because it's Andrea, and she just finds the most interesting vintage books, she also popped in this, which is Space Family Robinson Annual, Lost in Space. It's like a little bit of a short story collection. There's text in it, but there's also like a whole sequence of comics in the middle of it. I don't know anything about Space Family Robinson, guys. I never watched that show, though I have seen the Lost in Space Netflix reboot. I've seen the first 2 seasons of that, so I kind of vaguely know what this is, but yeah, I'm gonna read it. It won't take that long, and we'll see what it actually is. I don't know when this was published. There's like Roman numerals in it, and I literally cannot read Roman numerals past like 20, so back to books that I bought for myself, which I have not read yet because I haven't had the time. I have Noor by Nnedi Okorafor. This is her latest novel, or novella. It's actually pretty short. It's about 200 pages long. This one, I don't really know what it's about. I just haven't quite wrapped my head around it. It seems to be about a woman who is born with multiple disabilities, and as an adult she's very heavily augmented, and something goes wrong. She is on the run with somebody else, and it's described as a fast-paced, relentless journey of tribe, destiny, body, and the wonderland of technology, and the fact that the future sometimes isn't so predictable. One of the things that I really enjoy about Okorafor's work is that I just don't always know what to expect from her stories, and they're often just from a different cultural viewpoint that is sometimes challenging to me, and I enjoy that challenge and that kind of stretching of the imagination, so I'm sure I will get something out of this. I just need to crack it open. The Art of Space Travel by Nina Allan. I was shocked to actually see a Nina Allan book in a bookstore. I'm going to say that that bookstore had excellent taste. This is her first short story collection. It's one of my anticipated books of the year, and I am really excited about this. There are some stories in this that I've already read, such as The Art of Space Travel, which was a Hugo nominee at one point. So I know I've read at least 1 or 2 of these stories in the past, and there is something about Nina Allan's style that just, the way that she writes prose, the way that she just blends her world building just so matter-of-factly into her stories, it's it always just grabs me and pulls me in, and it's like I get submerged in the story and then forget that I'm reading it. I don't have that experience with many things these days, and I treasure the authors that do that to me regularly. So yes, this one, I need to dive into this collection sooner rather than later. Next, I have two anthologies that were kind of on my radar, and I just had to get them when I saw them in an actual bookstore, because it's been one of the joys of the last years that I've actually been able to go back to some physical bookstores. So I got Walking the Clouds, an anthology of Indigenous science fiction edited by Grace L. Dillon. I was kind of on the lookout for this because I know Dillon had an essay or a story in, was it Defying Doomsday? I can't exactly remember. But anyway, I came across something that she had written, and that led me to this. And I'm very excited because like Indigenous voices in science fiction specifically would be really fascinating. It is not entirely an anthology of short stories though. There appear to be quite a few novel excerpts in this. Like there's an excerpt from Midnight Robber by Nala Hopkinson in it. But I don't recognize a lot of the names in this, so it should be a bunch of new to me authors. And pretty much the same story with this next one, which is Latinx Rising, an anthology of Latinx science fiction and fantasy. This one is edited by Matthew David Goodwin. And once again, I don't recognize a lot of the names in this one. They're Kathleen Alcala, Sabrina Vorvolias, Carmen Maria Machado, and who else? There was somebody else in here I recognized. Oh, Daniel Jose Older. So once again, hoping to get some more exposure to diverse voices in SFF, and maybe find some new to me science fiction writers to keep an eye out for. The very last volume of The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. This is volume 11. It might end up being my very last read of 2021 if I find time in the day, and in this day because I'm filming this on the last day of the year. So yes, I'm sad that the end of the series is here. This has been pretty much my favorite manga series of the last couple of years, but I'm also really excited to see what the conclusion of the story will be, and if there is actually a proper explanation of the curse and the monsters and the role of this little girl. I almost missed these last two physical books because I am a disorganized mess this morning. But I also have Yarnitecture by Jillian Moreno. This is a knitter's guide to spinning, building exactly the yarn you want. This is one of my Christmas gifts, and as you may have noticed, I'm on a big learning how to spin yarn kick. I've already read this book, it was very helpful, and yeah, I just want to spin all of the yarn at the moment. And the other beautiful and lovely book I have here is The Tea Dragon Tapestry by Kay O'Neill. This is the third and final Tea Dragon book. I do have book 2, technically speaking. The Tea Dragon Festival is on its way to me in the mail. It was another one of my Christmas gifts, but it won't arrive until January at this rate. Anyway, now that I have the complete collection, I will probably treat myself to a reread of these in January just for something sweet and comforting and beautiful, because these are books for children, for younger readers, but they are just so gorgeous on the inside. I really love Kay O'Neill's work. Let's check to make sure I didn't miss any of the physical books before I move on to the ebooks and the audiobooks, because really, where is my brain right now? Okay, I think that is it. Okay, so now I have 8 ebooks or audiobooks to mention quite quickly. I have read all but 2 of these, so I'm not going to say too much about them. I've talked about them in wrap-ups at some point or another. So we have Ambush or Adore by Gail Carriger. This is another one of her delightfully deadly novellas that explores the epilogues of the side characters from the Finishing School series. Ambush or Adore is Agatha's story, and I really enjoyed this one. I think this is one of the best novellas in the Parasol verse. It is quite unusual in how almost melancholy it is, but it is still a lovely romantic story at the end. Then I have Paladin's Hope by T. Kingfisher. This is the third Saints of Steel novel, which is a fantasy romance with a major mystery plot. This one is Galen's story. And so on the shorter side, it's not a novella, but it's a short novel, and I enjoyed it a lot. Like, basically any of Ursula Vernon's World of the White Rat books, I love them. The Clock Tower duology, the Saints of Steel books, Sword Heart, etc. So I look forward to these Paladin books so much, and I think it's been said now that there are going to be like 7 of them. So we might get 4 more. I'm very excited. Then there is Knot of Shadows by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is the 11th Penric and Desdemona novella. It's one of the shorter ones, I think. I'm also kind of hoping to sneak this one in before the end of the year, but I haven't actually started reading it yet. But you know it's gonna be good. Then there is an anthology, Silk and Steel, edited by Janine A. Southard. I have already talked about this in my batch wrap-up of recent anthologies. It is basically queer adventure SFF stories. I super enjoyed it. Not every story was the best, but it was such a fun collection to read. Like, one of those things where you just want to come back to it and just keep reading it because it's like the fun point of your day. That's how I felt about that anthology. Then audiobooks, I have Leviathan Falls by James S.A. Corey, the final Expanse novel. I haven't started listening to this yet, but soon, very, very soon. Then one of the ARCs that I got from Libro FM, because I'm part of their like early access program, is The Week by David M. Henkin. I will talk about this and the next 2 books in my next wrap up for December. But this is a nonfiction book about the week, like the weekly cycle, the days of the week, and how that became such a prevalent method of timekeeping and like structuring our time, even though it's not biological or astronomical timekeeping. A really interesting question, but I thought the book was frankly a little bit too long. It started to feel like it was repeating itself somewhat. Then a poetry collection, Call Us What We Carry by Amanda Gorman. This is her debut poetry collection that I also listened to on audiobook, and I enjoyed this to a certain extent because, you know, Gorman is a good poet. She's a budding poet. She's new, but she has a strong style and voice. What I found I didn't super connect with in this collection is that most of it is about events of the last 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic and the stuff going on with US politics. And I found that that material was still so fresh to me. Like, I just lived through that. I didn't necessarily want to have it rehashed and retold to me. So a good collection, but topically not really what I was expecting. And then finally, another ebook. I bought Hither Page by Cat Sebastian, and I reread it in December just for the feels. It was so good. This is a male-male historical romance set right after World War II, and it's 2 unlikely people decide to investigate murder mystery in an English village. I liked it so much. It's so good. I have nothing more intelligent to say about it than that. I'll talk about it more in my December wrap-up. And that is it. Those are the last books of the last book haul of 2021. I think that this is a good note to end the year on, so I shall leave it there. Thank you so much for watching this video and any of the others of the past year. I appreciate all of you so very much, and I'll be back to talk to you again in 2022, and until then, Happy New Year.